Welcome, guys, to the Still Going Strong podcast. My name is Robert. I'm joined again with my wonderful wife, Kaci. And we are so excited you guys are continuing on this journey with us through our marriage, your marriage, and really just defining what that is. And, again, still going strong. Are we still going strong, or are we still going strong? So I'm thankful to be sitting at this table with you again. I didn't run her away. She decided to actually come back. I remember when we first was going to do this, you said, well, we might do one and see how that goes.
There's a reason I haven't watched it.
Yeah. So I've got the first one. I got the first one edited. I know that by now you've probably already watched the first one, and yeah, she refuses to watch it, but
maybe at some point. But for now, no.
But one of the things. So as we sat and we was getting ready to figure out what we were going to talk about, I just, I started thinking about things, and you're going to think this is probably the silliest story that I could think of. While we're still trying to figure out the format for this, I think we really need to share share a story of something that may have happened in our life, and then come back and maybe find some biblical breakdowns of it and things like that. So, like I said, you're going to think this is the weirdest story that I could have. I mean, it's just sideways.
Okay.
So, we can both agree that I was very self-centered. BC me was very self-centered.
Okay, yeah.
It was all about me, my wants, my needs, and I didn't care what anybody else wanted, even at the expense of you sometimes. And one of the things that I think about the most was the fact that when we lived in Minnesota and we had, it started off where both of us, we'd say goodbye to each other. I'd hop on a bus and I'd head towards St. Paul, and you hopped on a bus and you headed towards Minneapolis for school.
Yeah.
And then it got to a point where I got tired of riding the bus. So I got a parking pass.
Mm-hmm.
And it was expensive. And it cost you, like we was talking about the other day, it costs a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the fact that I was also paying for gas, but I didn't like having to ride the bus down there, ride the bus back. I felt like I was wasting a lot of time, where my time could be spent on other things.
Uh-huh.
However, on the other end, I didn't think of you and the fact that you were also spending that same amount of time riding the bus, and having to put up with people on the bus. When in all honesty, I think about it, and I'm going to start tearing up. Oh my goodness. Is that now looking at BC me, I should have been more concerned about the fact of you having a parking pass. If either one of us was going to have a parking pass. Not saying that the buses on Minneapolis, St. Paul were unsafe in that day.
Yours were more unsafe than mine were.
Yeah.
Mine were better than yours, and most of the time I was actually using the college buses, so that wasn't as bad. But it was a little bit of a walk to get there.
But the fact of the matter is that when I got tired of having to ride the buses, I got the parking pass, and I didn't. So I guess that's kind of a sorry. And that's one of the things, and that's where it leads me to the fact that, BCS not having, I think one of the biggest things in a marriage now, looking back on our 20 years, it will be 20 years when this posts, so I'm going to say 20 years.
Yeah.
Looking back on our 20 years, I have to say the biggest thing that has defined our marriage up to this point is having Christ at the center. Because
made a significant difference, yeah.
it's made a significant difference. Mm-hmm. Thank the Lord we didn't self-destruct our marriage when we wasn't the center.
Mm-hmm.
I tried very hard, and I know I admit that, but that's just where my mind was going, is that if I was to tell anybody out there, what's one thing you absolutely got to have in your marriage?
Absolutely. It's Christ, 100%. We went through 7 years of not having Christ, but now we've had Christ for 13, and it's been amazing in those 13 years. Not to say that there's not issues, because we were still sinful people, so,
Absolutely.
there's still issues, but that that 7-year change, whenever that change occurred in both of us, it made a significant shift in our marriage. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, and I guess we can maybe I guess we didn't really I guess we never really had the not a Christian attitude. I mean, because I'm sure there's people out there that's had marriages that they just didn't even consider themselves Christian. They considered themselves atheist. I guess we really can't speak to that because we've always had kind of the Christian framework.
Yeah.
Um, Even though that you and I can both admit that,
With name only.
yeah, the last thing that was in our head as far as our marriage was Christ. That was, yeah,
I mean, I think the conversation of us potentially going to church happened one time when we were in Minneapolis, and that was only because you had a teacher that worked at a church, and so we talked about possibly going and visiting that church.
yeah.
That's the only conversation I ever remember having about church when we lived in Minnesota.
And the reason why is because, like you said, whenever I went to church, I was working with Pete at the church, and it was a huge church, and I was like, "Hey, maybe we should go check it out." But you're right, you're right. Our it was really Christian by well, I know who Jesus is, I know what Jesus is, and even though that was a very very broad thing too.
I
So
mean, it was more along the lines of, I'm not Hindu, I'm not Muslim. I mean, it wasn't, that's
yeah,
about
yeah.
it.
And I believe there's a God, but I also believe a lot of things.
Yeah.
But
I believe
yeah,
there's a God, but I believe I can do whatever I want.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So and so that's where I started thinking about that, and the fact that our marriage before Christ, um, when Jesus wasn't at the center, both of us, we were in the center, or we felt like we were in the center, meaning that it wasn't. I know that you weren't. I felt like you weren't as bad as I was. I felt like you did consider my feelings a lot, and you considered my thoughts a lot. But I know for me, when I thought was the center of our marriage was me,
Yeah.
my needs being met, what I wanted being done. Um, and the thing is that, and there are marriages out there where the wife feels the same way. And the thing is that there can't be two sinners to a marriage.
Centers, not simmers. Because there are two simmers in a marriage, if you
Yeah,
will.
there are two sinners in a marriage, but there aren't two centers
Yeah.
of in a marriage.
No, there can only be one. And I mean, that one is either going to end up being a person or, in some people's case, a child.
Yep.
But the only good center is Jesus. I
Yeah.
mean, the only one that's going to actually amount to anything and make you have a good marriage is if Jesus is at the center.
Yeah, because if when we put ourselves at the center, then we're, again, like we're talking about, it's my wants, my needs, my things like that. You're putting a person that, or even like what you said with a child, putting
Yeah.
a child at the center of a
I mean,
marriage.
that's easy to do. I mean, even as a Christian, it's hard to have that boundary of saying my marriage is separate. My daughter, our daughter, does not define everything about us. And I mean that's an easy tendency, especially as a mom, to do, is make your child your everything. And so you can absolutely get caught up in that, even as a Christian, to get caught up in making that child the center of everything. And they're not. They're not the center of everything. Yes, they're important. They're a great gift from God, but they're not the ultimate gift from God.
Yeah, because we look at, you might be going down this route where people put their identity, in their child.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so we want to raise them up so they could be the very best they could be. And when we send them off, and then we feel like that's a reflection of us, when really, quite honestly, I mean, you think about God. God didn't give us children for them to be our pride and joy. Um, the main purpose of childbearing is to multiply the earth.
Yeah.
It's to bring more of us into this world so that it can go out. And of course, through all the years, sin has corrupted it, and a lot of us send things out in the world that really honestly shouldn't be sent out in the world. No, I mean, unfortunately that's what it is. But whenever two people that follow after Christ and follow after God bring a child into the world, it's not for us to have an identity in that child and to send them out. It's they are like something, because the Bible talks about stewarding. We are to steward that child. We are to watch over that child and grow that child in the ways of the Lord, so that when he goes out or she goes out, she can bring, so they can lead a Christ-centered life and a Christ-centered marriage.
Mhm.
So you're right. You're absolutely right that whenever we do bring a child up, and I agree, it is easy to put the child in the center, because like, because they can't defend after themselves. They can't, we still got to provide for them financially, with shelter and food and knowledge and wisdom. And so we get so into pouring into them, and we feel like, we have to put them at the center, when at the same time we need to steward after them. So getting back to this point that, with Christ being at the center, and in BC days, like I said, put ourselves in the center,
Mhm.
or we can put others. We can even put like our family. I know some people that, you know they talk about, that, oh, people don't like their in-laws, and sometimes it's because somebody will come into a relationship and they'll bring their in-laws and make them into the center of their marriage, where they have to, well, well, our marriage isn't like my dad's marriage, or my parents' marriage, or whatever marriage.
Mhm.
And sometimes we let other people be the center of our lives.
True. So for our marriage, I don't necessarily feel like there's ever been a time that our families have been necessarily at the center, but there's definitely been times that either our family as a whole or individual people within our family kind of seem like they get a little bit too close to our circle kind of thing and try to influence our center a little bit more, well, a lot
It's,
more than what they should.
and especially in the BC days, because we were looking for how to make this work, because we grew up two totally different parenting styles. So
Absolutely.
so figuring,
Neither of which were Christ centered.
neither of which was Christ centered, and so trying to figure out, how that center really worked. You're right. We almost went to the outside fringes,
Yeah.
and I tried to pull in a little bit of what I thought worked, and what people were telling me how things worked, and you were trying to pull in things of what people were trying to tell you how things worked, and
I don't think either one of us, at least in the first little bit, did a great job of pulling in what we thought worked. I
yeah,
think both of us had a tendency to pull in the things that didn't work instead of actually pulling in those good things of what did work within our two families, well, or more. Um, with our outside families, yeah, we definitely pulled in more of the bad than the good.
yeah, yeah. So, and then now we notice, and now, making that transition, we realized that we had to get self out of the way. Christ calls us to be selfless. He calls us to take up our cross and follow him. He calls us to die to ourselves, that nevertheless, not the I that live, but Christ lives in me. And then, I mean, I've noticed a night and day change in that. I mean, yes, I'm not perfect, and there are times where my selfish pride likes to well up in me, because that's something that I've dealt with for so long. It still tries to rear its ugly head, and I know that, and I see that. But now, now I see us both trying to say, okay, what is Christ wanting to do in this?
Mhm.
What does Christ want to do in our marriage? What does Christ want to show? And again, I think sitting right here talking, talking on this podcast is just one of those things that's like, okay, well, we've been through so much, we've seen so much, that, we need to let other people know. We need to share kind of our ups and downs in our 20 years of marriage.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely ups and downs from BC that can be shared, but then there's also a lot of ups and downs since we've both come to Christ. I mean, putting Christ at the center doesn't fix everything,
No, 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 no,
but
yeah.
it makes it a lot better. A lot better.
Well, putting Christ at the center does fix things, as long as but we still have to peel self off the throne before we
Absolutely.
put Christ up.
Yeah.
It's when we try to seek Christ in the center while we still have self sitting on the throne.
True.
That's where our problem. That's, I know, at least for our marriage, I know that's where, in my problem lies.
Well, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I can be selfish. I'm
Yeah, I
not
know.
gonna say that, but you say I know, really? Thanks for that. Um, but
Just try to help cheerlead you.
I also know that I think sometimes, versus necessarily me putting me in the center, there's a lot of times I put you in the center. There's a lot of times I put you on a pedestal and I try to make you the most important thing. And while I love you, you're not.
Yeah.
And I know that that can be very detrimental. I mean, that was the case for me, BC, and unfortunately, sometimes even since Christ got a hold of me, that I basically try to put you in the center and everything about you and what's important to you, and that's not what it is. It's what God wants us to do with our marriage, individually, everything together.
Yeah, yeah, and you're absolutely right, because that's another pitfall you can absolutely fall into. I think is by, and I know there's times where I've done that. It may be brief, and, but I feel like I've done that to you before too. Is put you in the center, and say, okay, well, I'm going to disregard my time with Christ or something like that. I'm going to help you and make sure that you are taken care of and the things like that. Like I said, very brief, but it still has happened. I I think,
For a minute, maybe.
yeah, for a minute maybe, but
No.
so but what you're saying is true, because then when we put the spouse in the center, or the other spouse in the center, then all of a sudden then we're not, then we're disregarding again, we're taking Christ out of the center, and then and then it doesn't make it work, because then it feels like you're disregarded, when you put me in the center, because then I'm not meeting you halfway, or whatever, however you want to call that.
Yeah.
It made me think of that quote that everybody says that marriage is 50-50.
No.
It's not 50-50.
No. 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 Definitely not.
What's the right percentages?
That's 100, 100. You both have to give, actually, sometimes more than what you feel like you can give. I mean, you have to give everything to your marriage, and in order to even have a remotely successful marriage,
Yeah.
you have to give everything that you can.
And when you don't, it's because it's almost like, I don't know. And again, this is another thought just came to my mind when we talk. If when they do forklift training, they talk about the center of gravity,
Mhm.
and they actually show a triangle. And so as the triangle as the center of gravity goes towards one of those triangles, or one of those middles of the triangle, then all of a sudden you start to get top heavy or load heavy, and there's a chance of tipping.
Mhm.
And it makes me think of that, is that whenever we focus on ourself, and you know we start to focus on ourselves, then we're getting too close to that triangle, and there's a chance we can tip over. Or if we start focusing too much on our spouse, then there's that. um you know and now I know some people would say, oh, okay, with the other one's got to be Christ. And I think Christ is the middle. It's like Christ is, instead of it being in the middle of that, or the top of the triangle, he's in the
Mhm.
middle in this situation.
Yeah.
I know we talk about the
The
drawing
triangle,
close,
that, yeah, drawing
drawing
closer
closer
to
to
him.
yeah,
Yeah.
but in this example, in my mind at least, the center of or the center where everything's stable and at rest, is whenever our center of gravity is rooted in Him, and it's not towards, because even if we put ourselves, because that could be the top of the triangle in that instance, where we put both of us in the center, we're still leaving Christ out, and
Mhm.
that's still a disaster. Because when we start getting so focused on each other and things like that, we still have to make sure that Christ stays and is our center. So if I could leave anything with you guys, it would really be that, I know that we've talked about it, we've had a couple topics, but really, truly, honestly, um, I think you agree that Jesus at the center of our marriage has got to be priority number one.
Absolutely. Jesus has to be the priority of our marriage and the center, and he's got to be the priority individually. He, I
Yep.
mean, he's the only thing that matters.
Yep. And even whenever you have we didn't even really get into this part, but the fact that if you are in a marriage, and let's say you have one spouse that believes in, or one person believes and one person that doesn't believe. Yes, that's hard, having, then you won't really have Jesus at the center of your marriage. Hopefully, you have a marriage where, that you guys are still trying to equally work together. But the only thing I can say then is you just got to keep praying for that non-believing spouse. You got to pray that they would come. We've seen that happen.
Absolutely.
We have plenty of friends that will attest to that. That you just have to keeping Christ at the center of your life.
Hmm.
You have to keep wanting Christ at the center of your marriage.
And I mean, essentially, for everything that you can, you're putting Christ at the center, because you don't want to get caught in the trap of putting yourself in the center or your spouse in the center in that. So everything, as much as your ability to do so, you continue to put Christ in the center. Your spouse may not reciprocate that, but as long as you continue to do that and you continue to do everything that you can, continue to pray for your spouse and let God do the work.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and with that, I am so thankful again to be able to sit at this table with you, and I'm thankful for you guys for coming and checking out the Still Going Strong podcast. If you guys have any comments for us, if you guys have any questions for us, um, ladies, please email my wife, Kaci, at iammatthewministries.org. If you have a question for me, men, you can email me, Robert, iammatthewministries.org. If you have something you would like us to discuss, we'd be more than welcome to bring that topic and be able to walk through it. But I hope you guys have gleaned a little bit of this, and maybe we can just make your marriage just a little bit more like Christ. Love you guys. Have a great week. God bless.